Yeah, like you already started describing a little bit the life world of North Philadelphia, how it was all black, because the rest of the city, the white parts.
Let me just make one addition.
Yeah.
All black, but everything was owned by white people.
Mm-hmm.
The corner stores, and we all went to the bars, the houses that people rented, were all white. And that's not to say there were not pockets of homes where the black professional and middle classes lived. I can show you in parts of North Philly. But a black person may have owned this bar or maybe a store, but I recall mainly white people owning stores and houses that people rented or rooms that people rented.
And what were some of the places, like you mentioned, like Uptown Theater, yeah, just to even give a little bit more about what that life was in North Philly.
Well, how could I put this? As I recall, culture meant a lot. Music was highly important, and therefore music and then of course dance meant a lot. And so when rhythm and blues in the late 50s, pretty much the early 60s, starts to get recorded a lot and therefore marketed, and people could buy records and record machines, and in bars there would be jukeboxes where you can hear all this music. And then there was this network of theaters, which were not owned by black people, but where black people went either to see movies, but ultimately where different kinds of shows, live stage shows were. In Washington, it was the Howard Theater. In New York, the Apollo. In Philadelphia, the Uptown. In Chicago, what was it? I forget the name. In Chicago, this was known as the Chitlin Circuit. Chitlin, you know what chitlins are. But you see, most of these artists couldn't perform in white venues. So, I mean, you could see everybody from James Brown to Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder at the Uptown. And we did. We did. And this is where all of these performers, you know, learned how to perform publicly, how to sing. So the Uptown was like a real anchor. And there would be long lines of people waiting to get in. I know, not having a lot of money, I would go as soon as the theater opened up, and they would show movie after movie, talking about B movies, these were C movies. And then the first show would start, and that would be about 6 o'clock. And I remember the guy who was the most famous DJ here on the radio. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to start the show. And put your hands together and welcome to the stage of the Uptown, Gladys Knight and the Pips." And then they would perform, and they could perform. And now we're going to bring to the stage Little Stevie Wonder. And then the spectacular thing, I had never seen nothing like this. They would say, "Now, headlining our show, The Tempting Temptations. And here all these black men come out all over 6 feet tall, and the band playing, and they groove, and I'm saying, oh my God. And it used to be, we always had sound equipment that was always less than a standard. So, it's everything is the lowest, but it didn't make no difference. We could hear what they were saying. But the Temptations came out there. They were called the Tempting Temptations. And all these tall black men with processes. I mean, serious processes. You know what I'm saying?
Let's see what a process is. I'm still confused.
I'll show it to you. I can show it to you better than I can describe it to you. But see, we always want our hair to be, they would call me having good hair. You know what I'm saying? But, normal hardcore black hair is not. So what they would do, and this is men and women, but now for women they would call it a perm or whatever, but for men they call it a process. Why they call it a process, I do not know. But entertainers, there were places, barbershops, hair salons, where you could get your hair straightened out. They use a straightening comb, a hot comb. But then they would use other kinds of chemicals. And cats would have these serious, like James Brown, he always had a process. They'd have these serious processes. And a lot of cats in the street, they got processes. Now everybody didn't deal with a process, and the Temps came out there all white on, and they had, it used to start out where you'd have groups, right? There would be 2 microphones, one for the lead singer and one for the background. Now you all heard rhythm and blues black background singers, what they call blow harmony, woo, and all that kind of thing they do, and they have 3 and 4 part harmony in the background while a person is singing lead. This is completely black. Comes out of doo-wop, which was doo-wop was more or less completely a cappella, from the street corner. So you'd have to be able to sing, to hold your note, and to know how to harmonize. These are all artistic skills. So at the Uptown, so you could generally hear the lead singer on his microphone, but it was not always certain you was going to pick up all the harmonics in the background. The Temps came out there, okay, they have 1 microphone for the lead singer. It would be Eddie Kendricks, David Ruffin, generally. They were the 2 main lead singers. But the background, they had a thing like this, and 4 microphones coming out from the stand. And then, all of this choreography, and they, and that shit get to going, and they get to moving and shit. And then David Ruffin, who was the lead singer, he was very dramatic. And he could go down into a split, come back up, it was, and so that was the Uptown. And then they would have jazz shows. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, at the Uptown, in the neighborhood. And at that time, you didn't have this well-developed idea of celebrity. So, okay, the Delphonics, they're from West Philly. They'd be up at the Uptown. They were not to be taken lightly. Their drama, the way they presented, their music was kind of operatic and dramatic anyway, And it was very, it confirmed that our music was superior. And that the only reason that they brought the Beatles over here was to put black music down and to give white people something to talk about. Yeah.
But since we are already talking about the music, maybe we can, because you were talking about that also when you were describing your mother, but then the music also establishes the black romantic ideal.
Oh yeah.
And then in general, love, not just romantic love, but love in all its forms seems at the heart. And yeah, I think, okay, maybe you should say something.
Well, my mother's favorite was Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, Ella Fitzgerald she's one of the most accomplished musicians in America, because she sang all the major American songbooks, from Ellington to Gershwin to all of them. And but she also liked Billie Holiday and others. What was the question once again?
No, just you're describing this music and you're saying it was clear that this was superior, and that goes to the question of civilization and an alternative, a civilization in potentiality, which is an alternative to white civilization. I'm also trying to ask you about basically what constitutes that music and the question of love.
Oh, the romantic idea.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. And this, I think, that romantic ideal comes out of the civil rights movement. Black music is always tethered to love. But then, the blues and the sorrow songs also, you have this tragic dimension. But it's with rhythm and blues and black people writing the songs that black people sing and writing the lyrics that I think you get this robust development of a black romantic ideal and black love for men and women loving each other and expressing it. And that's all you hear when you hear rhythm and blues. And black men really are outstanding in expression of love. And this is when we get the full development of the falsetto voice. And it would seem ironic that a man singing in a female voice could be expressing love for woman. But I attribute it to opera, where the romantic voice in opera is the tenor. And most black men are not natural tenors. Most black men are natural baritones, at least when they mature, baritone and bass voices. But they have this, it seems, this desire to sing in the most romantic way, and they discover the falsetto voice. Now there were tenors, like you take Smokey Robinson. He is a natural first tenor. I think as he got older, his voice went lower and he went into falsetto. Russell Tompkins Jr., a natural baritone who developed this rich falsetto voice. And so, with the Delphonics and a lot of them. So, I would say by the mid-60s, late 60s, you have this blossoming of the falsetto voice as a way to express romantic desire and romantic feelings. And then you hear, which we did not, I don't think we heard in the previous periods, people talking about your beautiful brown eyes and your curly hair, your kinky hair, your soft brown skin. This is all different. And And that's different. You know, the romantic ideal is different from, you know, dance music and such. And that's why, you know, guys like Teddy and Marvin become so popular. Now, Teddy is not singing falsetto. He's singing baritone. Marvin is singing falsetto. But it is a romantic rendering. And then they write, you know, various black songwriters and producers write and produce the music.
What were your favorites? Who did you listen to growing up and then also later?
Well, I mean, my favorite music is, oh, by the way, Luther is not falsetto. He's a natural tenor, high second tenor. What's the name? Barry White, he exemplifies a man singing bass naturally, baritone and bass, and Donny Hathaway, he's a natural second tenor, and he sings, and he conveys all of these things that you would get, let us say, in Russell Tompkins. He does it in his natural voice. See, what Russell and them can do is to go very high and go places where the black male voice doesn't naturally go to. And still, they can do certain things. How do you, the coloration, the colors that they can evoke, you know. And then for Teddy can do that in a different way using his natural baritone and such. And Donnie does it. Now Donny Hathaway is a whole different thing because he's special. And Stevie Wonder's a natural tenor who often sings falsetto. My favorite, I dig the whole genre. It's hard for me to favor any of them. You know, Aretha Franklin comes in so many different flavors. I mean, it depends on what you want on what day, and you can find it in Aretha. Patti LaBelle is almost a vocal gymnast whose force and power is an expression of desire and passion. I don't think there's a lot of nuance and subtlety in Patti, but she don't need it. You know, I like all the top male singers: Luther, Teddy, Marvin. I like all of the groups, R&B groups. I like the Motown groups, but I like the Philadelphia groups. I like some of the groups from Memphis, from Tennessee. But I like the whole genre. And it's just black. It's black, black, black. There have been and are significant white R&B singers. I think the one that black people look up to the most is Tina Marie, who says she's a black woman in a white body, and she was. Michael McDonald is good, but he's not. He's a white man singing good rhythm and blues, and he knows music very, very well. But if you had to say, well, Teddy or Michael McDonald, I'd have to say Teddy, you know, because of what he evokes, and I think your point of love and the gateways to love, and not just physical love, but not denying it. Because you can listen to rhythm and blues, and often I try to send out things. I know mainly, I send some to Michelle. I send music to Serafina and others, and Alice now. But they could be singing about romantic or sexual love, but there is something that is also deeper than that, which is that plus more. Like there's this song called Smile by Angela Wimbush. I think it's on the playlist I gave to Alice, I think, and Kathy for their birthdays. And she's singing about your smile, but she says she wrote it for her mother and grandmother. But when she sings it, for popular and I guess market reason, it is, the love, your smile, her lover's smile. But I'm always getting this double meaning.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a question about that, because there's also, like that's what I was trying to get at, that there's the romantic love, but then it's love in a much broader conception. But then together with that, it's also, there's the religious, and then there's the secular.
And the maternal.
Yeah, and in general, it's not easy to separate these categories as neatly as you would be able to. And I think because of that, like this music is very unique and without any other example. And I guess I'm asking you to say, why did it develop in this way? And the other thing is, well, why did it develop in this way? Because it almost seems to speak to a totality of human experience all at once.
I can't answer the question because I don't know why. But to produce all this music that addresses love, you're talking about a people who know love, and love is a part of their culture. Because when they sing about love, there's no question they're singing from their souls, from their hearts, and even desire, aspiration. I think, and nobody else does it. It's hard. It's very difficult. So I think it is a cultural thing. And I think it is aspirational. We do want to love. We do want, this is why hip-hop, I'm convinced, has to be an external manipulation and intervention of forces hostile to black people. How do we go from all this love to the opposite in not even a generation, a few years, Because this love in the music and love as aspirational is so much a part of us. I think most of us. I can't say why it developed like this. In some ways, I can understand the development of gospel better than the development of rhythm and blues.
Yeah, I mean, going to the question of the religious, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about the church, and then you also mentioned phone. It's on your right hand side. Wait, are you looking for your phone? Very nice.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so, the question of the church, you've already talked about it a little, and then you've also talked about how growing up, all of the people you were seeing also worked, and they were in unions. And this question of the factory and the church coming together to create this ecosystem that gives rise to this, what we've said, called the black proletariat imaginary. Can you talk a little bit about why it was the factory and the church in concert?
and maybe we'll make this the last question for the time being, because it's been a long thing. But I think when you look at this, there's an architecture, and there is a connection of the church and the factory and the home and the community and historically black college. You know, it's kind of, you can go in your life in a year, you can go through all of these spaces, you know, maybe you could, you know, worker, a parent, a leader in the church, an activist in the community, are all connected. And if you see the factory as an institution, see the church as an institution, you see the community as many networks and institutions, you see something organic. It's almost an ecosystem. And frankly, I'll say, you know, and again, I'm not exaggerating, most of us lived within that system. And so when we go, I don't know whether you've gone on some of these deindustrialization tours with us, but you see these factories right across the street are houses. You know, the factories closed down, people still live in the houses, but they would walk to work, they would walk to a factory, not everybody. But jobs and work and industry were just so much a part of your life, part of what you saw. And, you know, as we say, you know, the church, a leader in the church would also possibly be a leader in the union. Now, when you get leaders like Henry Nicholas, they accentuate those relationships. Also,
I think specifically we're interested in like Leon Sullivan and Zion Baptist, like all of the ministers getting together in the civil rights movement too. But like basically that sense that like what Prabhu was saying about the religious and the secular, or like romantic love and like love for the people, all of that coming together. Or even like the church is not just the church on Sunday, but it's actually an institution for the people. And so if you could talk a little bit like specifically about Leon Sullivan, or like for instance like even like like the Christian church and like the Nation of Islam, like the Black Jews, like all of this is happening in the Black social system.
You talked about it so beautifully. That's it, man. I couldn't add it. I mean, it was just like you described it. I mean, honestly, all I would say is, yes, that's the way we live. And, of course, these leaders that see, you can't produce black leaders in integrated situations. That's why it's hard to get somebody to graduate from Harvard to be a genuine black leader. You just can't do it. Because they're disabled by the process of socialization and education. But like a Leon Sullivan, who said don't buy where you can't work. Simple but deep. And uniting 400 churches, black churches, to break down the discriminatory walls of corporate Philadelphia. I don't know how else to describe it. You know, it creates, as a kid, it's so exemplary. It creates a sense of possibility. And these are all Christian churches, mainly Baptist, but not exclusively Baptist. Were there more than 400 churches in Black Philadelphia at the time? Yes. But 400 united. And that was enough. And such a campaign had the support of the community, you know, because it represented what you said. And, you know, these agents, these figures who sacrifice everything for the cause of justice, you know. And, but, you know, I know I had this conversation with Magna, yeah, where she asked, asked me I just gotten out there, and we just sitting around drinking coffee, and she asked me what did I think was stronger, secular or religious organizations, and I didn't hesitate. I said religious organizations. You know, and that's something, especially for Black people. You need that. I don't know. Well, we'll talk about it later. But in our experience, the church is a foundational institution of resistance, and that's why King is so effective. And then, by the way, the language of the church is very important. It's different than the language of the street. Frankly, it's different than the language of the Nation of Islam. Could this movement, let us say the civil rights movement, come from, let us say, Father Divine or Daddy Grace, or the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? I don't think so. One, because they were only 30, 35 years old, these churches. So what people knew were not these theologies. They knew the New Testament and love and justice and so on. And, you know, it's as you described, but to see it, and such is a whole different thing, especially if you are a kid. And to see your elders and your people and your leaders standing up. It creates a zeitgeist. Ask me something else, Maria. I don't know what I answered.
No, I think that does answer it. Well, I feel like my follow-up or where I want to go is kind of more into education, but I don't. It depends on if you want to wrap up soon.
Let's do education quickly as soon as it takes us.
Okay, let's do like quickly, and then I think we can do further.
Oh,
like I think we can cut this up into two.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I think one of like what you're describing of seeing Leon Sullivan in the churches and basically like the education that was instilled in you by like the church and then by like these movements and then also by your mother, your father, like all these institutions. I guess how does that relate to then like the education that you got in like the Philadelphia public school system, like Central High School, and then also I think connected to that, like what were your aspirations like when you were a child, like when you were really young, like when you grew up, what did you want to become? And then when you got to Lincoln, I guess how did things change, or how did you like basically get on your way to becoming like who you are today?
This is a great question. And I'm glad we're taping it because we can return to some of this. Because I have to think about, you know, existentially, it's, you know, that's what I think I was saying to you yesterday, Nuri. Even when you take this breakup of the world communist movement, it's one thing to read about it, but then to hear a person who was a part of that narrated it, it's a whole different thing. I know for myself, I don't know a book that can explain what this really was. You'd have to actually, and it's only my experience, but at least you have a living, breathing expression of something. And really, that's where the real thing was taking place anyway. It's about education. In the public school system, I felt that there was school and then there was the community. The schools were white teachers, white people, and the black lived experience, the black world was black. You know, and I guess not being aware of it as a kid, but now you think about it, there is dissonance between a white authority of learning and then your community, which thinks in its own way, has its own leaders, and the schools and the teachers don't seem to be interested in your real life and your real experience. You know? So different than y'all in India, you know what I'm saying, Paul? You know, where it all comes together, your family, your university, your school. I mean, I'm not saying that it had to be perfect. I don't know about South Korea. I think you all were close. You'd have to tell me, because, you know, being a Chinese immigrant, but I'm telling you, Michelle, for us, I never felt, I knew we needed to be educated. But then, what was happening in the school, especially when we got to Central, was so distant from what was happening in the civil rights movement, what was happening in your community. And, you know, the message was that your experience in your community were trivial, that you all were the problem. You can imagine. So, in a lot of ways, I know at Central, I felt I was being put down constantly. Constantly. It's not till I got to Lincoln. And as soon as I got to Lincoln, and you've been at, you know, the countryside, I could breathe, and all I wanted to do was spend my time in the library, in my classrooms, and in my room reading. You know, for the first time, the school was not humiliating me. I cannot begin, I don't have the language to feel that educating you was to humiliate you. They didn't want to teach you. That's why it's hard to learn things like math, certain technical, logical things like that. If the assumption, and you know it, but you don't know how to identify, if the teacher doesn't think it's worth teaching you because you can't learn it. This is why Baldwin is right. All of this goes back to the white man. If you want to make the argument that there's something wrong with black people, yes, there's a lot wrong with black people. But this larger problem, it has to go back to you. And it's worse now. And so Lincoln, I felt, oh my, and the teachers cared about us. And especially a person like myself, because I was so dedicated. And I just felt, oh God, I can read. I started reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, on my own. And, there were only 600 of us there, maybe 600. And our dining hall couldn't seat everybody at one time. So we had to stand in line and wait for one group to go in and eat, and then the next group. And even if it's snowing or raining, we would do that. But it was, we didn't feel any way about it, and we didn't want to be too comfortable. At least I didn't, because I felt it would separate us from our people, you know? So we didn't have the finest dormitories. Some of us lived in a place called the Village, which were these kind of army barracks built after World War II for veterans who had to have a place. And we liked living in there, you know, because one thing good about we could bring our girlfriends there. But that spirit, we wanted to be tough, we wanted to be the smartest people, we wanted to be the most revolutionary students. Not all of us, but enough of us. And this is when education and knowledge, I got excited about it and it came together. But I can't, you know, how could you do certain things to young kids? And they did it without thinking about it. It was normal. They don't belong here. You know, why are they even trying to compete with we Jewish people? Yes, some have been friends of black people, but the rest of y'all ain't. Don't even try it. You know, and here we're marching Leon Sullivan, don't buy where you can't work, all that kind of stuff. And for white people, it was us trying to get something that we didn't deserve. Can you imagine? And they still believe that. You hear Charlie Kirk and Trump, you know. That's why, you know, he and I are damn near the same age. I see him as a bitch. I see him as a bitch, man. You nothing. You know, and all them white guys like you are nothing. And most black people feel that way. Black men, to look at a white man like him, it, like we did not deserve anything. That's the way when we went to school. And so our parents wanted us to get good grades and, you know, go to school and, you know, dress nicely and be polite and respectful. You know, yeah, there were dudes that was hoodlums and all of that, or thug-like, but they were the most angry most of the time, the poorest. But, you know, here my parents were, you know, and so you had a sense of you could do, so if you just even, the sense was that you were going to be abused, you're not going to be treated well, but we have to go through it. You know, we've done it before, just work hard, and so on. But they were not going to allow it. Most of us would be casual. That's why I say that 20%. Y'all think about it. I might not have it right. It's never been fully counted. But I think 20% of us are direct casualties. You know, and when the depth of the injury is fully manifested, it could come at early as maybe 6 years old. You know, but for most, you don't get out of your 20s. Then you descend into poverty. Once you get into poverty, you're not coming out. That's what you see on. Once you get into that, you're not getting out. So then for black males, it's the long death march. And it ain't that long. So, you see a cat like me, I mean, see, I have a lot of characteristics of black men. I really do. And I'm not trying, it's not ignoring it, it ain't even performative. It's my natural, and sometimes I hope that you all understand me. It's not easy, but it's just the way I am, and I don't say I'm in no constant pain. It's not, we don't feel like that. I don't think most of us feel like that. We feel, like, you come to that realization, it's not us. It's us in the sense that we cannot get control of everything. Forces are so huge, but I'm just lucky to be in the free school with y'all, to have a way to, to work things out intellectually, because that's what I can do best, but I'm just trying to figure out how you feel. Anger is a part of it, and then I feel a certain sadness for children. You're being hit too hard, and you can't protect them from everything. You can't, and everything is, coming at them. I'm just lucky my daughter and her husband are able to, raise their children. And they got like I always say, it's an iron curtain around them. And everything ain't coming in that house, every kind of music. My other grandchildren are doing well, but my daughter Nicole is more conscious. Misha's conscious. My son is too reckless, I think. But I think my son has a no struggle position, I'll put it that way. Nicole does not have a no struggle position. But her struggle, and every parent, how do we keep our children safe? This is huge, man. But you get my point. I'm just fortunate that y'all want to interview me like this, because most people don't have an opportunity to tell things, and even I'm trying to tell, in my most intimate feelings that I can give you, and I don't know that I'm getting it all out, but most people, they feel that nobody's interested in me, nobody's interested in how I feel, nobody, you get a big burly black man, you think he's strong, he ain't strong, he's strong on the outside, on the inside, broken, pain, emotional, at any moment could just collapse emotionally. I deal with them a lot. These big burly cats, these bouncers at a nightclub, who work in security now, Sometimes I have to, I have to, like, come on, man, you don't have to, who are you talking to that with? Respect somebody. I have a little authority to say because I'm an old head now. But man, the pain, I don't suffer the pain of a lot of them, or most of them, but the pain and disappointment, You don't just abuse people. So then what do you have? Oh, we look at the Eagles and Galen Hurts and the, whatever. And then that don't work that much no more. So you're alone. You see the world is against you. You see no way out. You know what I'm saying? And that no way out, once it gets to that point, then that long march, just get in line, let's start marching to the ultimate death. That's what you can almost see, you look at it the right way, you be listening, you see it. I ain't got that much longer here, 50 years old, I ain't got that much time,
Yeah, it seems like Lincoln was actually really, really important.
Say that again.
Lincoln was a
shit, yeah.
where it seems like a lot of like what you were striving for, what your aspirations finally were like basically like unleashed and like supported for the first time. And not just supported by like faculty and professors and like the dean, but also having peers, like fellow young people who are all like, not all, but like very many of them were actually struggling and saying, maybe together we can actually do something. And yeah, I just think like it's interesting how like ideas and knowledge actually played a really big part in that. And so yeah, can you tell us just a little bit about the different ideas that you got mixed up in? Like what was
you tell it better than I can,
like what was the intellectual like world, I guess, like before and then at Lincoln, like how did that
like I teach Kant, we have that's from Lincoln. I wouldn't have gotten that at the University of Chicago. I'm telling you. The thing about the African independence movement and various leaders, that's Lincoln.
Like in Nkrumah.
And Nkrumah.
So then you were thinking also about like Cape Verde.
That's right, absolutely. Then South Africa and all. A world that was actually the world. And not a world that is narrated by white people, a black world. That's what I talk about with these podcasts. A colored world, and only white people can talk about it. That's what these podcasts are redoing the white supremacist narrative about expertise. But no, this is really Du Bois. Black people grow and can do better the less contact they have with white people. You get a black person that fuck around too much with white people, they disable. I'm not against interracial dating. I've dated white women being in the communist party. Not no deep things though. I was always hesitant, But you get a cat that all he deal with is white women, unless, I'm not saying in all cases, but too much dealing with white people, because you got to always try to explain too much. Why are you so angry? How the fuck you think I'm angry? I'm black, And it's a lot of things like that. But white universities, white professors, it's now, Emily talks about her white members, the poor people and stuff. I think there's certain differences there, but I think generally we do better if we can operate through black institutions, and especially younger people and children. If white institutions get control of them too early, they poison them.
Well, because they can't be on white terms. You can't enforce the color line on terms of white supremacy.
No, you can't. I'm telling you,
And it seems like the question is whether it is possible to have it on principled terms.
Whether it's possible.
Whether it is possible to actually have contact on principled terms.
Well, that's the struggle. That's the struggle.
Is.
And that's the fight.
So then, when you got to Chicago, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but what was your attitude or how did you feel about going to the University of Chicago, which is like an elite white institution? When you had gone to Central, then you were so happy at Lincoln, you went briefly to a white university, but then you wanted to come back to Lincoln. And in that time, like, I think you're
No. I went to Albright following my professor who said, you know, I'm going back to Albright and this. So I'm assuming, you know, and the thing was, this is white and therefore better. So I followed him to Albright. And I was immediately attacked by these white people. I couldn't wait to get back to Lincoln. But then going to the University of Chicago, I didn't really have time because I was arrested. And I didn't really have time to become a part of the political science department. I think at that point I didn't want to. Just like sometimes you all with these postdocs, you there, but you're going to spend as little time as possible. And so we then set up our independent study groups. And it made far more sense to me than what these white liberals and conservatives were talking about at the University of Chicago, because they were talking about political science as an arm of the white U.S. empire. And we wanted to study the anti-empire, anti-imperialist theory. And there was no space for it among white people, at least not for a person like myself. There were a couple of black women who we were down with, and they were at the University of Chicago. It was much easier, I think, for them. But then I had this mark on my back already that I was under indictment and so